Until now, I have produced 548 videos in different subjects and issues. With a few exceptions, all of them were created in the Spanish language. Starting now, periodically, I will start producing videos in English. Although English is not my first language, in my life I worked and survived in English language environments in Canada, in the United States, and even in Saudi Arabia for more than 20 years. I also wrote and published several books in the English language. Therefore, with this presentation, I will start a new cycle which will have the title Facts and Fictions. Have a good day. The first video will deal with climatic change and the well-publicized concept of anthropogenic responsibilities. Saying that climate changes is like saying nothing. Probably there are very few
clarifying expressions in science
than the words climate change.
It states only
that there was, there is, or there will be a change in the climate somewhere on the Earth and perhaps throughout the whole planet. Saying that does not clarify anything, because change, whether climatic or otherwise, has always existed, exists, and will exist during the whole of geological and historical time. In other words, it does not say anything that we have not known forever. First, let's define several concepts. Let's say that climate is the behavior of meteorological weather in a specific place or region over a reasonably long period of time, for instance 30 years. It can also be applied to the behavior of meteorological weather across the planet over an extended period, but that is much more difficult to identify or define. For example, in geology, global climate changes require lengthy studies of geological formations, and yet geologists often disagree to the interpretation of the results. Regarding recent global climate change, let's say that during the last 300 or 400 years, similar difficulties arise due to the multiple existing parameters and various forms of weather recording throughout history. The expression climate change appears constantly in the media, but in general it does not refer to a global climate change, but to changes at a local or regional level. These changes could be local or regional, but frequently they are not. Rather, they are only the effect of inappropriate human occupation of the land. In other words, climate change refers mainly to changes on the environment of meteorological phenomena, say storms,
hurricanes,
strong winds, floods, droughts, and so on. Generally, these impacts are related to changes in human occupation of soils and landscapes, and not really changes at the global level. For example, the same meteorological phenomenon can generate different impacts before and after deforestation process generated by human occupation. Sometimes land use change can cause changes in weather behavior. For instance, removing forests decreases evaporation.
This fact determines
that there is less moisture available for the formation of clouds
towards the interior of the continent, and therefore a decrease in rainfall.
These are local climatic changes, which can sometimes turn regional, that are generated by human action. An example of this is the decrease in rainfall toward the interior of Brazil and Bolivia due to the deforestation of the Mato Grosso region and the Amazon. Changes also occur due to the industrial emissions.
One typical case of degradation due to mining and industrial activity is the city of Norilsk in northern Russia. Because of air and water pollution, the original ecosystems around Norilsk suffer greatly from an environmental point of view. There isn't a single tree within a radius of 48 kilometers from the plants and quarries. The site has been stripped of its soils and surface formation. There are large open pit excavations and tailings covering more than 10,000 hectares, and the drainage has been completely modified with profound degradation of nearby lakes and rivers. It is estimated that 4 million tons of cadmium, copper, lead, nickel, and arsenic, selenium, and zinc are released into the air annually. In this example, the changes are only related to local environmental degradation and are not global.
That favor or hinder the formation of clouds depending on the case. The occupation of the soil in arid countries, and more particularly the opening of quarries and the implantation of constructions, leads to the generation of aerosols that also influence the cloud cover and radiation that reaches the ground, with influence on the local and regional changes. This phenomena is clearly visible in Arabia, where I lived several years, and in the arid countries of North Africa. But none of this refers to any global climate change. Of course, climate change exists, as it always has been in geological history. But these changes are much more difficult to identify, evaluate, and verify. However, the journalistic media enjoys confusing with climate change any extreme meteorological event such as hurricanes, floods, droughts, or tornadoes that are actually normal and even frequent and do not refer to any climate change, surely not global climatic change. These journalistic qualifications are aggravated when a theory is developed at the academic level that would explain these meteorological phenomena, that they are the result of a supposed global climate change, with partial data and makeup adjustments. It is also argued that this change is occurring due to the increase in CO2 in the atmosphere. This compound has increased slightly in recent years, but remains at very low levels, just 0.04%, which is just enough for photosynthetic functions to take place in plants. It is enough to remember that geological CO2 levels have been vastly higher in various periods of the geological history. In the atmosphere, there is no excess of carbon, quite the opposite, but this is another topic that we will address in a future video.